Since its inception in 2010, The Walking Dead has earned its place as a long-running TV classic. Despite its overwhelming popularity, though, it's by no means immune to criticism. We're here to show you some unpopular opinions about The Walking Dead that raise good points. We're definitely not the first to notice that The Walking Dead plays like an inverted Star Trek. According to the imagination of Gene Roddenberry, post-current civilization humanity cooperates, prospers, and revels in scientific advancement and exploration. Meanwhile, people in the Walking Dead universe form tribes and go to war against each other instead of pooling their resources and working together against an obvious and omnipresent common threat. While Star Trek is optimistic, The Walking Dead goes a step beyond pessimism into full-blown nihilism. For whoever's left of the gang, their victories don't really matter because they live in a world that's already been conquered by walkers. They just survive terrible things in order to survive more terrible things. Therefore, if the series ends with anything other than all the characters becoming dinner, it will have betrayed its central themes of futility and doom. Considering the fact that the writers have sometimes significantly deviated from the graphic novel's trajectory, there's no way of knowing if this inevitable conclusion will come to pass on screen. At one point in 2006's Clerks II, the character of Randall Graves goes on a little diatribe to explain his contempt for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. As he puts it,
all it was a bunch of people walking.
Well, if you replace walking with killing zombies in Randall's rant, it's not an inaccurate description of The Walking Dead. We're definitely not saying the show has ever gotten boring. In order to get truly boring, it would have to reduce its seasonal body count to a degree that would make it a different show entirely. But it goes without saying that things have gotten repetitive. Rick and the crew struggle against the elements until they find the Green family farm. After walkers overrun the farm, the heroes set out on their own once again. Then they come to the prison, and they live there until walkers take over that one too. Same deal in Alexandria. In other words, The Walking Dead has a formula and it sticks to that formula pretty closely. If a corporation makes a successful thing, it could be a TV show, film, book, what have you, then its next step will be to recreate whatever that thing happened to be in hopes of similar monetary rewards. In a vacuum, that's not a bad impulse. It's why film genres exist in the first place. But we've hit a point where big companies fear taking risks on just about anything they don't think is a surefire hit. For proof, look no further than the world of The Walking Dead. After all, Fear the Walking Dead, The Walking Dead World Beyond, and any other Dead-adjacent television projects in development exist at the expense of an unknowable number of other shows that weren't greenlit because they lacked a built-in audience. Perhaps we shouldn't judge AMC too harshly for its decision-making process because that's also why we got Better Call Saul. But it is worth asking, at what point do we no longer require expansions on a story that gets accused of redundancy and spinning its wheels as often as The Walking Dead? Are The Walking Dead fans all jerks? Of course not, but there's a significant minority among the fandom that's pretty toxic. For proof, look no further than Josh McDermott's social media experience. The actor has received death threats because some fans dislike the character he plays, the cowardly Eugene. Of course, if McDermott responded in kind to each and every crazed fan who threatened his life over the actions of an imaginary person he plays on television, then McDermott would look insane, and that would interfere with his ability to gain further employment as a Hollywood actor. His only other option was to quit social media, and we can't say we blame him. McDermott's far from the only cast member to deal with online strife. Sadly, fans body-shamed Alana Masterson, prompting both the actress and her co-star Stephen Ogg to strike back, encouraging trolls to, quote, go do something productive with your life. When Michonne Hawthorne first appears at the end of Season 2, we see her leading around two walkers on leashes. Later, we find out that these are the reanimated corpses of her boyfriend and her boyfriend's pal. Evidently, she mutilated their bodies due to some justified resentment connected to the death of her son. But in the process, Michonne discovered that walkers become docile and harmless once their mouths and arms are removed. Even better, she learned that surrounding herself with armless, mouthless walkers rendered her invisible to actively hostile zombies. So why isn't every living person dragging a pair of neutered walkers with them at all times? If there's an effective method of walker deterrent available, why is Michonne the only person who ever uses it? Furthermore, why does she only use it when it's supposed to symbolize her paranoia and isolation? This is a list of opinions, of course. It could very well be that people don't want to stand next to mutilated walkers 24/7 because that would be a completely disgusting way to live. But once you got used to it, in our opinion, being constantly safe from walkers is worth being constantly grossed out by walkers. Let's talk about October of 2016. Fans had waited all summer to find out whose skull Negan would shatter at the onset of the 7th season. The season premiere started, and we all held on to our butts, anticipating a payoff that would validate all our theories and arguments over who had the best guess. After a handful of eternal minutes, we watched both Abraham and Glenn face immensely unpleasant, blunt force deaths. And it was gory. Disturbingly so. And there's something strange about the fact that the show made us wait so long, made us debate and wonder and speculate, only to treat us to a truly brutal beatdown that left us all feeling queasy. Granted, nobody on The Walking Dead is ever safe. That looming uncertainty is written into the genre's DNA. But in the lead up to Season 7, the uncertainty gave way to a kind of sadism that one might use to promote a snuff film, and that raises uncomfortable questions.
You are not safe.
Why were we so excited to watch someone die? Is there something wrong with us? Do we need help? And did the show step over the line with those brutal killings? So if you tell us Rick Grimes seems like a nice guy, you'll get no argument. The protagonist, played by Andrew Lincoln, sticks by his friends and family and always tries to do the honorable thing. But perhaps by design, he's not what we'd call a fascinating individual. In fact, as a sheriff's deputy with a wife and a child in suburban Georgia, he was living a pretty typical life before the world ended. Circumstances in subsequent years inspired considerable intensity from Grimes, but there's not a ton else that makes him feel intrinsically unique. He didn't rise out of an abusive relationship like Carol. He's not the most charismatic person in the room at all times, a la Daryl. He isn't an awesome swordsman like Michonne. He doesn't even have a memorable gimmick like Jesus or Ezekiel. In some respects, he's similar to John Connor in the Terminator franchise. The other characters look to Rick Grimes as a leader, and they clearly draw a tremendous amount of inspiration from his words and deeds. But nobody ever gets all that specific about what precisely makes this guy so special. Ultimately, this places Rick Grimes in the same category as Buffy Summers and Jerry Seinfeld, thoroughly effective main characters who are nevertheless bland as dishwater when compared to all of their friends. The series premiered in 2010, about a year before the emergence of its contemporaries Game of Thrones and Once Upon a Time. These ensemble dramas all felt designed to fill the void left by Lost, which infamously dangled solutions to the island's many mysteries inches in front of its audience's proverbial face throughout 6 seasons. Likewise, The Walking Dead gang's journey in Season 1 to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention led us to assume the origin of the infection might be explained at some point. Since then, many seasons have aired, and in all that time, characters have rarely expressed interest in any big picture beyond immediate necessity, and it seems unlikely that anybody still tuning in expects to find out what started the zombie apocalypse. One could argue that attaching a clear-cut cause for the end of civilization undercuts the themes of random suffering and mayhem that permeate throughout the rest of the show. So if the series never explains where the walker infection came from, it won't be a worse show for allowing its big mystery to go unsolved. In fact, it's probably safer to leave that particular rock unturned, rather than offering up a disappointing explanation that wasn't even needed to begin with. As we learned in September of 2020, Season 11 of The Walking Dead will be its last. Regardless of how the spin-offs have turned out or will turn out, AMC made a good decision here. In fact, if they made a mistake at all, it was not lopping off the show's aging head a few years earlier. In fact, why would AMC ever continue a beloved sci-fi horror series well after its quality and fan interest started to decline? Did AMC executives not learn the tragic lesson of The X-Files? When it started in 1993, The X-Files became a surprise pop cultural phenomenon, much like The Walking Dead would years later. Also, like The Walking Dead, The X-Files probably should have tied off all its loose story threads and called it a day sometime around Season 5 or 6. Instead, the network dragged it out for 9 seasons and 2 movies, plus a revival years later. Seasons 10 and 11 aren't complete and total garbage, but their worst entries, particularly the cringe-inducing My Struggle 4, are bafflingly terrible to a degree that damages the legacy of the entire series. In its defense, The Walking Dead has never produced an episode as abysmal as My Struggle 4, but the show won't have officially dodged that bullet until it ends. Calling it quits at Season 11 was a good, albeit belated, decision. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite shows are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.